We're going to cover just stretching for walkers pretty much as a presentation, and ways to integrate flexibility easily into your walking programs. Most of the presentation will be, it'll be half and half. We'll do part lecture and part movement, where you'll move around and feel the movements that you'll do that can be easily integrated. It's not jumping jacks or anything, you'll be fine. And my name is Laura Noyes. I'm one of the personal trainers here at Gainesville Health and Fitness Centers, working mostly at Yoga and the Women's Center. Welcome. And my main focus has always been flexibility. I do a lot of continuing education on it, and also experience in presenting a variety of flexibility. I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I really like to learn. And so I always feel the more I learn, the more people I can help. And flexibility, I know, is a part that part of people's program that sometimes isn't emphasized enough. So flexibility, so improving your walkability with flexibility training. So we'll learn to easily integrate flexibility techniques into your, your walking program to increase circulation, range of motion, reduce soreness, prevent injuries. Welcome in. And we'll also learn the different techniques that we'll use will be self-myofascial release with things like the stick, as well as dynamic flexibility exercises, static stretching exercises, and most importantly, you'll learn by doing, so you don't end up like that guy there. So we'll hit up like 3 different ways to really improve flexibility, and integrating all 3 will be really one of the best things to do to really have overall total body flexibility. Why should we stretch? So flexibility has many benefits, and when you integrate all different components of flexibility into your program, welcome, you'll really have a chance to experience all the benefits, being fuller range of motion. You'll have increased efficiency and safety and increased happiness, all these wonderful things from improving flexibility. Anytime throughout the presentation too, I want to say, if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and we'll tackle them as we go. Well, flexibility, what is optimal? Everyone has different degrees of range of motion, and there's something called genetic flexibility, which is almost like the flexibility you were born with. You have people that are hypermobile or hypomobile, come on in. And so flexibility, sometimes when you see someone that goes, you could say, hey, can you touch your toes to the floor? And you see people that are like here, and then you see, hey, can you touch your toes to the floor? Like, oh yeah, and they get their palms to the floor, and then they're just like, how long should I hold this? Like, they could be there forever. That's the part when you're looking at someone who has like hypermobility or genetic flexibility. This isn't something that they worked for a year to build up to just being palms to the floor. This is something that they were just born that way, and they could just move that way. And there's people who are the opposite of the spectrum. These people walk around like this. I think bodybuilders tend to be a little bit hypermobile, and really those people tend to be more likely to have muscle type of injuries. It's rare to find someone hypermobile. Not rare, you see it, but it's not as often as a hypomobile, someone who needs work on flexibility. Hypermobile, another thing you can think about is the Cirque du Soleil type of people, the people that are like, you do this to your arm and then do this, and then they're like, oh yeah, and then I could take my leg and do all sorts of things, and they can just bend that way. Again, something that they really didn't work towards achieving. Most of the time, these people are born to move this way. So when you look at flexibility, everyone's individual flexibility will be different, and other factors that can affect it, along with like genetic inheritance, is abnormal or unnecessary tension in musculature, meaning like knots, trigger points, adhesions, and we'll get to talk to that. And that's where things like myofascial release, where you release a muscle tissue, where you kind of massage yourself pretty much, where that comes into play. Also, injury or illness can sometimes affect it. A knee replacement, someone's range of motion on their knee, once they have their knee replaced, if we can get it back up to here, that's great. Scar tissue adhesions, if you have surgeries or stuff and you don't do, sometimes with scar tissue, of making sure that if you do have knee surgeries or even abdominal surgeries, making sure that you do some type of work with flexibility, whether it's massage or stretching, to really go from this type of position to being able to open up. So all these factors can play a part in someone's individual flexibility, and everyone will have a different kind of level of optimum based on what they're given. Any questions? Self-myofascial release. So throughout the presentation, I usually label it as SMR for short. Self-myofascial release is just learning how to release the thin layer of tissue. Come on in. The thin layer of tissue that goes over the muscle. So we have from the tops of our head to the tips of our toes, this really thin layer of tissue called fascia that goes over the muscle. And if you can think of sometimes when you've worked, if you have experience working with trying to work range of motion, you're like, I feel like I can stretch and stretch and stretch, and no matter what, it's like I always end back right where I started. Like it just doesn't seem to improve. One of the factors that can limit it is if you have lots of knots or adhesions in the muscles. So if you can think of like you have this very thin layer of tissue that goes over the muscle, and you have all these little clumps all throughout. So all these clumps, you can think of this being the leg. Let's just call it the hand, because that's what it is. So if you can think, if I have all these knots working, trying to improve flexibility, and I get it back to this point, and then all of a sudden it just over the next course of the day, it goes right back. If you can think of all these little knots, you're working on trying to take them and put them right back so they go right back to their normal resting length. That alone will help in like improving flexibility, because you're really dealing with applying that pressure to the tissue and putting that tissue back from this clumpy state right back to its normal resting length. And that alone will help with improving flexibility, and it sometimes can be overlooked. And so if you can think of massaging is pretty much what you are doing with self-myofascial release. And there's tools like the stick, or you see people things like this. All these are self-myofascial release tools. You also see people using things like balls, like Yamuna balls. All forms of massaging yourself pretty much. This is probably really deep self-myofascial release, because it can get in there pretty deep. Foam rollers also can get in there pretty deep. Usually the positions you position yourself in to foam roll your quads or your thighs require some degree of strength, so sometimes you can break a sweat just doing it. The sticks are a really nice introduction to self-myofascial release, because you can have the ability to control just how much pressure you exert. So if you find an area that's really tender, usually that's the area where you have a little bit of knots or adhesions, and you can focus in on that area and be able to manipulate how just deep you want to go, and not have it be too deep where it's like, I don't want to ever do this again. All right, so any questions? So far, so good. So trigger points, how do muscle knots affect range of motion? Kind of covered it a little bit. The trigger points, knots, adhesions compromise the tissue structure in which they're located, and it places a greater strain on other tissues that they'll work harder to try to compensate for any weakness elsewhere in the body. So these points in the fascia, or that thin layer of tissue, can restrict or alter the motion about a joint, resulting in a change of like normal neural feedback to the central nervous system. And eventually the neuromuscular system becomes less efficient, leading to premature fatigue, chronic pain, injury, and less efficient motor skill performance. So less able to move as freely as you like. So in addition to addressing just range of motion through stretching, addressing range of motion through releasing the tissue with myofascial release. Yeah? Yeah. Am I on? Yeah, the light is red. Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Oh, so stick your weight and improve flexibility. I'm gonna just pass these out. I'll pass one, and you guys can just try them out. You can. They're very user-friendly. You're just going to grab the handle and find a place on your leg and just go at it. You can find a place on your calf. Go on your back, go on your neck. You'll gently roll the stick forward and back over the area that you're trying to get to. You can use it on skin or light clothing. And just know that it's not necessary to hurt the muscle in order to help it. Yeah, pass it around. Everyone can just play with it and try it out. Using the stick before you go for your walk or after to aid in recovery will both help improve flexibility. And usually if you come across tender points, sometimes they won't feel so good. So when you're rolling forward and back and you find an area, ooh, that's more tender than the other, that would be the area to focus in on. And you'll find that with each stroke that you go forward and back on, that tissue will release and release. By the end, you'll feel a lot better. And usually the best way to describe it is you'll feel released or just more ease of movement. And these are just ways to stick hamstrings, inner thigh, quads, calves, most of the muscles in the lower body that you'll use for walking.
When you're using the stick, how much pressure are you applying?
You manipulate it yourself, which is nice. So you could be nice and light and gentle to yourself. And you find a tender point, you can be as evil as you want to be and stick it out. Sometimes I find if I'm really intense and really digging deep, it'll be really intense for about 30 seconds and then it releases. And sometimes I really don't want to kill myself, so I'll just keep doing it for a minute, 2 minutes, nice and light till it releases. Knowing the more intense, usually the faster that tissue will go, that tender point will go away. Good question. Yeah. Any other questions? So far, so good. You guys are great. All right. The gym sells them. You can find them online. We sell them at the gym, and I believe the price ranges from $20 to $30. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere along those lines where I've seen anywhere $15 to $40, and it's because the company, it's really easy. It's thestick.com. That's it. If you go online, thestick.com, and you'll see all the different sizes. You see different colors too, and usually some will have a little bit more of a give to them. Some will be really rigid. And I have one at home I purchased at a convention, like a marathon convention. It's the travel stick, so it's this size, and it was the most affordable one, but it's I don't really need a big one. I just use it mostly for calves or just easy places to travel. When I travel, take it with me, and so they can be pretty affordable. We sell them online as well as I've seen them at the Tioga Running and Walking store at Tioga Town Center. They sell them as well.
Not good for your arms, though.
You can use it for your arms, shoulders, and if someone does it for you for your arms, it's a lot easier. Actually, if someone does it for you overall, it'll be a lot easier. But for your arms, I sometimes find pinning. So if I'm going for a forearm, if I pin it somewhere, and then I could go forward and back. So just being creative, I go pin it. And go, there's my bicep. But it's definitely, sometimes with getting to the back, it's just pretty much going right into it, getting to the neck. The main thing that gets the neck and the upper back is having the flexibility to really position it. Where some people lack the range of motion, you'll see them kind of doing something like that. So if you could get someone to grab it and just do it for you, it can be easier. So. All right, dynamic flexibility. So we covered approaching flexibility with massage. Now we're going to cover approaching flexibility dynamically. So dynamic flexibility combines the benefits of a warm-up and multi-planar training, meaning that moving in all three planes of motion, kind of the way we move through our life. We move forward, we move side, we rotate. So multi-planar, that's all that means. Just approaching flexibility from all three planes of motion. Not to be confused with ballistic stretching. Sometimes when I show people dynamic warm-up exercises, they're like, oh, this is ballistic. It's no. Oh, yes. No, it's not. So ballistic, I always say, is movement without control. That's ballistic. Movement with control is dynamic. So you have Jane Fonda, like, that's type of ballistic stretching, and usually you can incur injury from that type of stretching if you overdo and you get the nasty stretch reflex kick in, that you'll go and you're like, oh, I shouldn't do that, and the muscle kind of shortens in response from you trying to push it and push it and push it. So dynamic flexibility exercises, you really have complete control over it. You're not just bouncing into it. Dynamic stretching programs are developed by analyzing the movements associated with an activity, and you develop stretches to enhance flexibility based on the movements that you do. And we'll go into some dynamic flexibility movements that can be integrated into your walking programs. And since dynamic stretching exercises are stretches that enhance flexibility and balance, they can easily be integrated like as you start your walk, during your walk, at the end of your walk, or every single time in between. It's just a nice way to kind of add flexibility to your program and enhance balance, and sometimes a little bit of strength as well with the movements that you do. They warm up our bodies and get them ready to do what we want them to do, and increase our range of motion dramatically as we keep going through the movements. With the range of motion increase around the joints, it increases the likelihood to decrease injury. So we're going to cover 5 simple movements that can be really easily integrated into your walking program. So this is a part of the presentation where I'm going to ask everyone to stand. And then see about, maybe let's just push our chairs just a little bit off to the side. Just give yourself enough room to move around. Yeah. That's good. Alright, so I don't bite, so everyone can kind of circle up. Just kind of stand right here. Actually, the way you guys are lining up is perfect. I just have like 2 lines right here, or little semicircles. The very first one is called a ham dive. I'll just put the picture up. Really easy. That's me. You're going to be taking one leg in front of the other. And from here, your goal is to kind of hold yourself up and think about keeping this front leg that you have out in front straight. And all you're doing is pushing your hip back, reaching forward towards your feet. You're going to come up and then walk one foot in front of the other and repeat. And you'll just keep alternating. You'll come down, feel a nice stretch, come up, and then just keep walking forward. So if you can imagine, I'm walking. Oh, I forgot to do my stretches. There you go. So really addressing pretty much your whole backside flexibility, lumbar flexibility, thoracic flexibility, as well as getting a nice stretch predominantly felt in hamstrings and calves. And a really nice way to increase balance, because your goal is to try to do it like if you're doing a sobriety test. So those are ham dives. Any questions? All right. Quad walks are also a really easy one. All you're doing is you're going to step, grab a hold of the foot or ankle, and you're gently going to pull back until you feel a stretch. The goal to do this is to try to do it where you hold yourself up nice and tall to try to keep your balance. If you're doing it and you can't grab a hold of the leg, just think about bringing it back till you feel a stretch. Walk, bring it back, walk, bring it back. But if you can grab a hold of the leg, you'll get the most out of it. Make sense? These can be done in place too, but if you can just integrate them and think, hold 1, 2, step, hold 1, 2, and do a couple till you feel this nice loosening up of the quadricep, and then just keep going on with your walk. Easy? Yeah? See the balance? Yeah? All right. All right, a walking hip flexor stretch lunge. two options when you can keep your arms to your side, or you can choose to drive them straight up overhead. Driving them straight up overhead will sometimes provide a little bit of a challenge with balance. So your goal with this one is to take a nice stride forward to the point where you're on the ball of the back foot, the front foot is forward, and your goal is to think about driving your hip forward as you reach your arms up. Hold 1, 2, then step, walk forward, hold 1, 2, and step. Perfect. Your goal is just to kind of keep walking with it. I love it. It was almost like a High School Musical kind of thing there.
I had a drill instructor on you once.
So that was the nice one. The main thing is to just keep thinking, as soon as you step, think about driving the hip forward. And once you feel this nice pull coming up, think about as soon as you reach the arms up, you'll feel a deeper stretch kind of running all up the whole body. Feel it? Yeah. All right. Arm cross and open. Exactly how it describes exactly what you're going to be doing. You're going to cross your arms and then you're going to open them. Your goal is to bring both arms straight out in front, and then from here aim the thumb palm up and reach back, and think when you open up, arms are straight and you're trying to squeeze your shoulder blades together to kind of open the chest up. When you come forward, you're kind of almost trying to reverse it and open those muscles in the upper back up, so it's just forward and back, and you can just walk with it. I always think this one, sometimes when I go to demonstrate it, depending on how loose I am, it just looks like I'm just about to give you some kind of I love it, and it feels good. All right, one last one to cover. This one sometimes can be a balanced one too. It's just trying to open up the obliques, get them to work, get everything turned on. But you can always remember the leg you step out with is the leg you're turning towards. So every single time it's a walk, and just let your arms go and reach. Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's it. So think step, and there you go, and turn towards the leg. Yeah. So it's pretty much that simple. If you can just think when you're starting your walk, or before you start your walk, during your walk, it's just always nice ways to integrate flexibility into, and you hit up all major muscles in the body, legs, upper back, abs, you name it, you get it. So, feel good? All right, I think if you guys stay standing, I'm gonna, we'll practice these two. So the last part of it, so you integrate the stick before, after the walk, really address the muscle tissue. You can integrate flexibility by doing these type of movements throughout your walk. And lastly, just these are nice movements to do more at the end, where you stop and you hold a stretch. So static stretching is what it's called. It's kind of like, think of like yoga, how you hold a pose, static stretches, and it's the other name for it. So static stretching is a process of passively taking a muscle to the point where you feel this gentle stretch, and you hold for a minimum of 20 seconds to get the most benefit. So minimum of 20 seconds. You can hold a minute, and that's great too. So static stretching combines slow force with long duration, and usually it's the most common type of stretching seen. There's no bouncing or rapid movement. You should just feel a mild pulling sensation and no pain, and certainly not in your joints. Usually I say if you feel pain in the joints, it's usually an indication that something is wrong, and best to listen to your body and to stop. A new endpoint will usually tend to be achieved after you have held the stretch for a bit of time. So this is the static stretches are also at the end of your walk. It's nice to just spend your last 5 minutes kind of coming down to a slow walking pace, and then stopping to do these stretches. Do all the stretches slowly, never to the point of discomfort. And if you have a hard time remembering like 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. Instead of doing that countdown, just you give yourself like 6 to 8 deep breaths. Usually by the time you're done relaxing and breathing, you've done about 20 seconds. So good to keep in mind, just do big inhales, big exhales, and usually by the time you're done with about 8, you've achieved that length of time. Begin each stretch standing up, and feel free to rest one hand on something if necessary for balance, like a tree or something outdoors if you walk outdoors. If you're on the treadmill, use the handles on the treadmill. If you have time to go through it again, go through it again, especially if you feel sometimes when you're holding it, you're like, I could hold this more than 20 seconds. Do so. Your muscles will be happy and thank you. All right. Hip flexors and calf static stretch. I have the instructions, but I'm going to show you the picture. This is Lucky. Back there is Charm. Sometimes they like to get their photos taken. So this actually looks a lot like what we did with this type of warm-up. Only thing is that you're actually going to take a bigger stride forward or a big step back, and your goal, instead of being ball of the foot, you're going to push your heel down to the point where you feel, as soon as you push your hip forward, that you feel this nice stretch running the back of the leg. You should feel this stretch running the back of the leg and the front of the hip. If you want to just add a little bit more, you can do the same and think of a nice stretch up, and you'll feel that stretch running up. And the goal is just to hold and just think happy thoughts. And from there you would switch, and you'd just be there holding. Think big inhales, big exhales. Oh, actually, I already feel that right there. But I always think, I'm trying to make sure that when you do take that big stride, if you drive your hip forward, you should not have the weight on the ball of the foot. If you do, just take a bigger stride out. That way that knee never goes past the toe and puts pressure on it. You should always feel the stretch more in the back of the leg, in the front of the hip, and the back of the calf. Questions? Yeah.
I'm a runner, and
Yeah.
I do the shin.
Rick? Yeah. Go into it.
I always try to do this before I.
Yeah.
Is there a better stretch I can do?
We're actually we do too. I'll run up. So pretty much the thigh and shin static stretch is pretty much the quad stretch, knowing that some people grab a hold more of the ankle or the top of the foot, but if you grab a hold more of like the toes, you'll be putting that shin into a bit more of a stretch. You can play around too with, if you're just focusing in on the shin, know that you can point the toe and then take it into 3 planes, where you're going to take that toe, instead of just pointing it down, take it and turn, get a little bit more peroneals outside of the calf, take it, point, and turn the other way, and you'll hit up a little bit more along the inside. So those 3 stretches would be good to integrate, as well as doing those would be good warm-ups for the whole ankle prior to running. Sometimes shin splints too with runners. It's a lot about the shoes. If you can find the right pair of shoes, usually your problems will go away. Sometimes when I run, I know it's usually time to get new shoes when I start developing shin splints. So, I'm going to go back up real quick. We kind of hit that one up. This one's back and hamstring static stretch. All you're doing is you're keeping the leg straight. Looks a lot like this guy, but without the sobriety test. So all you're doing is you're just both feet point straight ahead. Think about keeping the legs straight. Your goal is just to let yourself hang, almost to let the weight of your arms and upper body just take you down. Drop your head and just think big inhales, big exhales. Goal is just to hang out there. Take big inhales, big exhales, relax. Feel the stretch running along the whole backside. Sometimes this one, depending on just how tight your upper back is and body is, sometimes all I do is I just feel it more running along my spine, which is fine. That needs to be stretched, and that's a way to stretch it out.
Bent or straight?
Knee straight, you'll get more of a hamstring stretch. If you have like a knee replacement or there's limited range, you can probably still feel the stretch with the knees being bent. So, good question. All right, last stretch, the thigh and shin static stretch. You can find a tree, a wall. If you're outside, you can find a tree and just hold there if you need to help for balance. Or if you have a partner, just each of you grab a hold of each other's shoulder, and you'd be just taking that leg, see about more grabbing a hold of the foot, and so you can put that shin into a stretch as well as pulling back till you feel a thigh stretch. Some people, as soon as they do that, they feel a stretch, and that's fine. If you can bring your heel, and if you still don't feel a stretch, then keep your heel toward your bottom and gently start pulling back while keeping your body upright, so it's not this, but think upright and think gently pulling back until you feel that pull run up the thigh. Questions? All right, you guys are great. All right, walkability, flexibility, wrap up. So to wrap up everything we kind of talked about, using tools like the stick for self-myofascial release will help release any knots or trigger points within the muscle. That way you can return the tissue back to its normal resting length, and leads to optimal flexibility gains and injury prevention as well. Dynamic flexibility exercises can easily be integrated during your walk and help improve flexibility and balance while really attacking the muscles from all three planes. Static stretches are usually the best way to cool down at the end of the walk, because they put the muscle into this nice relaxed state, which usually is a nice way to end instead of like, oh, I feel nice and stretched, now I'm gonna go walk. Or it's usually best to do the dynamic type of flexibility and get movement and flexibility to lead you to the activity you're about to do, and hold off for the static stretches at the end as a cool down process. And I think that's it. Any questions?